Okay, your next speaker. Relax. Deanna Zandt is a media technologist, the co-founder of and partner at Lux Digital, and the author of Share This, How You Will Change the World with Social Networking. She is a consultant to key media and advocacy organizations, and her clients have included the Ford Foundation, the Daily Beast, Newsweek, and Jim Hightower's Hightower Lowdown. Zandt is a contributor to Forbes.com via her Forbes Women Prospect Tech blog, and a social media advice contributor at NPR's flagship news program, All Things Considered. She has advised the White House on digital strategy and public engagement. Zandt specializes in social media and is a leading expert in women and technology, and is a frequent guest on CNN International, BBC Radio, Fox News, and more. Give it up for Deanna Zandt.
Hi. How's everybody? How's everybody doing? Good. How are we feeling about snowpocalypse? I was listening to my iPod on the way here, and Let's Go Crazy came on, and I had this moment of, are we gonna let the elevator break us down? Oh no! Oh no, we are not. Thank you all so much for being here today, and thank you, Emily, for inviting me. And give it up one more time for the amazing work that HOLLA does all year long, all over the world. So hardworking, and they just make me feel so good. Before I get started, I just was thinking about all the stories that we've heard today, and how we all brace for when you get that like radar feeling of when you know somebody is going to say something to you, and you just brace for it, and it's contributes to these microaggressions that we experience, and that could just piles up, and it's so much. And when I get really super anxious, the little people that run everything in my brain start to think of funny stories. And I thought of one that I wanted to share with you, where when I first moved to South Brooklyn, and I moved to what had been traditionally a very stereotypical white Italian Brooklyn neighborhood, I don't. And I was walking my dog down the street, and there was a guy that was headed to the gym in my neighborhood, and he had on the track pants, and he had the whole outfit, I don't even want to go in it, but the whole outfit, right? And I got the feeling, and I was like, oh God, here it comes. And I'd only lived there for a few weeks, and I was like, and he walks up and he's coming, and he goes, it's a beautiful dog. And I was so relieved. I was like, oh, thank you. Oh, thank God. But I mean, because of the amount of tension when you're bracing yourself, and I just feel that way so much. So I'm gonna talk to you about the internet. We're gonna have a little internet time today. I run a digital strategy agency here in New York, as you guys heard. I'm gonna do that. Hello. How are you?
All right.
Yes. Now we can talk intimately. Sorry. I was telling my fellow speakers backstage that I generally try to caffeinate and get really sugared up before I start speaking, so that I'm not just hello everyone, let's talk about the internet now. So one of the things that I do, so that's my agency. We're based in Civic Hall in New York, actually not far from here on 20th Street and 5th Avenue. We have a really good time, and we believe that the way through the clutter and the noise of digital life is through our relationships with one another. And we say that we create measurable emotional resonance, which sounds really cool and is a lot of fun. And through that work, and through our social justice roots that my partner and I both have, we've started to really understand what makes life on the internet okay. But what I'm going to talk about today is what makes life on the internet really not okay. So who here has been harassed online? I'm not going to make you stand up and do because I'm too tired. Has anyone ever been stalked online or had that harassment move offline in some way? How about those folks? Yeah, that's a good time. Been bullied online? Oof. And who knows what doxing is? A bunch of people, because y'all are the smarties. Doxing is when your personal information is revealed. Somebody publishes your phone number, your address, your physical address, your email address, other private details. Doxing comes from the word documents. Who's been doxed in the room? A couple of people. Oh, isn't that you guys are high-fiving. They're like, yeah, we have. Hardcore. And it's terrible. People will tell you that this is what you can expect by being on the internet, right? And it kind of makes me insane. They're like, well, if you're going to be a journalist, if you're going to be an activist, if you're going to participate in public conversation, you're just going to have to expect that everyone on the internet is a jerk, and they're going to treat you really badly, they're going to harass you, you're going to get in trouble, you're going to get stalked, and especially if you're a woman, and especially if you deviate in any way, shape, or form from the cis, hetero, white, dudely, norm that we have been prescribed, right? So this is just what we have to expect. And I kind of get a little twitchy because I start thinking about that. It reminds me of other things that we're supposed to expect about maybe what we wear, as we've been hearing on these stories about what we wear in public, how we should just expect to be harassed if we're wearing something, how maybe we shouldn't have had so much to drink. Maybe you have the experience of driving while brown, or just, as Feminista talked about, being a black woman on the street. It's just inherently, these are the behaviors that you expect. I know, isn't that great? I had the best time finding gifts for you guys today, because I was like, we are dealing with some really heavy duty stuff, and I'm like, gonna have to, I love how the lights are like, I can't decide. Let's just watch it all together one more time. Uh-oh, cops are here. Oh, nice white people. Or my favorite is maybe if you just didn't flaunt it. Whatever you are that is the thing that I don't like, maybe you shouldn't flaunt that, and maybe everything would be okay. And that's kind of how it makes me feel in the end. And I'm sure it makes everybody feel this way. It's like, are you kidding me? Those strategies are the key. Really? She just gave me the 5-minute warning. We're gonna go long, honey. My thing says I've only been talking for 3 minutes, so, all right. Aren't y'all glad you asked me? Anyway, what's the key thing that keeps all of these strategies in place? What's the combination? What is that magical patriarchal combination that keeps these things happening over and over? The combination of isolation and shame, keeping us in our place, totally freaking out, and making us feel awful about everything that we're doing. And so, I start thinking about this. I'm like, isolation, shame. What's a way to de-isolate people? What's a way to battle shame and to take it apart? If there were only a tool, if there were only a technology at our fingertips that were designed to connect people with one another, the internet. And that's one of the things that gets me most frustrated is we talk about, sometimes people will interview me and say well, doesn't XYZ reveal the dark side of technology or the dark side of the internet? And I say, no, this reveals the dark side of humanity. And the internet is merely a tool that represents that and is mirroring that. So I'm not going to sugarcoat this. There's a lot of stuff that's crappy about what happens on the internet, and there's a lot of stuff that's amazing. I've made some of my best friends on the internet. My friend Jean is, I met on Twitter actually, and then she came to visit me, and my parents were like, oh, how do you know Jean? And I was like, the internet? They're like, you're not going to get axe murdered? No, I hope not. Turns out Jean's not an axe murderer. She's awesome. So I start, I get really crazy in thinking about what constitutes online harassment, where does it come from, how long we've been dealing with this. I got on the internet in 1994 when I was a first-year student in college, and I was like, which makes me like the old lady, and I'm like, listen kids, let me tell you about Usenet. That stuff was crazy out there. Nuts. And when I really started looking, there was this kind of gendered harassment happening even then. And I found this paper. Let's go back in time to 1995. There was this paper. I was studying feminist linguistics, which is a thing. I have a degree in it. And I was reading this paper about how when women take up more than 30% of the conversation space in a particular discussion group online, they were viewed as dominating the conversation, more than 30%. And that actually mirrors exactly what happens offline. And I think, are you kidding me? Really, 30% of the conversation? And then I started thinking about, when I was really digging in specifically to harassment stuff, I wanted to think about also what is it about this tool, too, that makes people really flip out, like in ways that they don't necessarily flip out offline? And what is it about that we can't kind of make the match? And it turns out that our little brains are not built to deal with digital communication all that well. That was actually me this morning. It's a selfie. And when I started reading about this and reading about the neurology that goes into this, I was just like, oh my God, you guys, we are so screwed. Because dig this. So as it turns out, we all know that body language and tone are really, really important to how we interpret things that are coming at us, right? So if somebody says to us like, oh, that's a really good movie, that means something entirely different than, that's a really good movie. We get that, right? And that's because if somebody just types it to us, we have not necessarily all of that context. And here's what's interesting about how our brains are built. So with body language and tone, it turns out the actual neural path that those messages take through our brains, put those messages up into higher processing centers that are able to deal with emotional nuance, something maddeningly familiar called context. All kinds of stuff gets happening in here, so you start to be able to process, this is what I think this person meant, this is what this other information is telling me. Without that, the messages go straight back to our amygdalas. Who knows what the amygdala does? Who wants to yell it out? Come on. Yes, fear, it's fight or flight. So those are our fight or flight centers, like the base of our most craziest reptile brains, right? And so basically when you get a message that's text only, that has no body language or tone associated with it, and it doesn't sit all that well with you, your brain thinks, oh my God, cheetahs are chasing us right now. We are in so much trouble, we have to figure something out, we have to escape. And so when you think about that, that this is the baseline of what we're dealing with when we're communicating with one another on the internet. You add in all of that isolation and shame stuff together, and that could get really problematic really fast. So there are a couple of things, though, that we can do, both as individuals, organizations, and groups, that you can take home with you and start today. And I'm going to give you 3 things in the none time that I have left. So the first thing that I need everybody to acknowledge in this room is that you are not alone. I know, don't worry, it's potato. Basically, I'm the potato and the kitten is my business partner, by the way. This is what we've determined. So if you start getting harassed online, remember that isolation and shame will do their worst to try to make this so much worse for you. The best thing that you can possibly do right now is to build up your networks and build up your communities into trusted networks and to support one another. You don't need a thicker skin, you need a strong community. And you need a semi-private place to support one another online. You should never, ever expect to just deal with this stuff yourselves. All right. Did I mention the sugar? There's these groups that are tackling these problems in very systemic, structural ways. There's HOLLA work, both online and off, that they're doing. And then Emily also founded last year something called the Online Harassment Task Force, to which I also belong. The first rule of the task force is don't talk about the task force. So I can't go into too much detail about what that's about, but people are tackling all kinds of problems in really interesting structural, systemic ways. We're looking and working with different platforms to address harassment, working with academics to try and unpack what these problems are, supporting one another when people in our ranks and our friends are getting harassed. There's also people like Women Action in the Media and Tech Lady Mafia. There's links that I'm gonna throw up a link at the end of this where you can find out more and read more about all of this stuff. There are lots of safe spaces out there for like-minded folk to get together, to plan, to conspire, to make stuff happen. Find your communities now, build them up before you need them. The next thing I want to share with you is Anne Friedman's infamous disapproval matrix. So once you're participating online, criticism definitely becomes part of life. And because of our reptile brains, remember the cheetah? It can get really tough really fast to figure out what's criticism and what's just garbage. And so for that, I give you Anne Friedman. She's created this matrix here where the top is rational people to irrational people. The people that don't know you, that side, to the people that know you. And in those 4 quadrants, you can start to take apart when people are saying, criticizing something that you've said or done online. The main thing is that they are criticizing your work and not you, criticizing things. The people who are your lovers and your critics are the people that you should pay attention to. These are people who want to see you improve and thrive, or they're experts in your field. Versus the people who are irrational. These are your frenemies. Watch out for them, because your worst frenemy is yourself. And the haters, people who don't know you and are irrational, i.e. YouTube commenters. This is my favorite quadrant, actually. She says YouTube commenters, jealous ignoramuses, and lesser rappers. So start trying to, when you're thinking about what's coming at you online, start trying to unpack a little bit what you have to pay attention to, what you don't have to pay attention to. And there's no one measurement, however, for deciding when something has turned from random trolling into straight up harassment. It's kind of like the Supreme Court's definition of obscenity. Who knows what the Supreme Court defined as obscenity? You know it when you see it. If you are seeing this, if you are feeling this, trust yourself and invoke that community that I talked about in advice piece number 1. The last thing, use your privilege. All of us bring something to the harassment battleground that we can use. And no, this isn't a competition for who has it worse. This is a way to recognize that we all have something that we can give. If you have the privilege of, sanity, and stability, and or the privilege of time, maybe you can volunteer to support others in crisis. If you're a dude or you're walking along the dudely part of the spectrum, you can call out other dudes' bad behavior, because unfortunately you're likely more to get listened to than people who aren't. Cis people, trans folk get it worse, specifically trans women of color get it worse than anybody else. Our job as cis folk is to call that out and be allies. Same thing for white people. People of color in general get it just so million times worse. And when you're looking specifically what Feminista Jones was talking about earlier, this is exactly what's happening. So basically I'm asking you to recognize that just like with street harassment or workplace harassment or any of the other kinds of harassment that exist, this is not just something that you have to accept or deal with. Which is why it's also critical for those of us who are fighting the good fights to be out there engaged and jamming. Changing harassment culture, whether online or off, is huge, and there are tons of roles to play if you have the capacity. And if you don't have the capacity, that is okay. Take it from people who have learned the hard way that self-care is incredibly important if you're gonna be in this for the long haul. So from calling out harassment when you see it, to getting involved in projects and campaigns and tackling online harassment, to being a trusted support person who can take screenshots and help document things when friends are getting crapped on. There's something everyone of all genders can do. We're seeing the future already shifting because people like you are showing up in treacherous weather like this, going to events like this and letting the world know that you will not stand for this. It's not just enough for us to hang out and hope that things get better. With you here, I know that they're getting better. Thank you.